Boy, oh boy, the 49ers love to keep things interesting, don't they? We've got a 49er quarterback conundrum. A lot of news came out in the last 24 hours or so. We're going to talk all about it. This is going to be a quarterback heavy show brought to you by two lumberjack twins. So stay tuned for that. All right, welcome back to Last Second Sports, where we are giving you our take down to the last second. It's Tuesday, which means I've got my lumberjack twin right here, Mr. So Real, Suneil. Suneil, what's up, man? How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, Jesse. I just want to know, look, one thing about you is you are a trendsetter, right? And I just want to know, I don't know if I know you're on social media, but you're only on certain sites. There's this whole AI picture like trend that's going on, and all the people look very similar to the renditions of you on your intro video. So I just want to know, did they kick you back any kind of like residuals, or like do they just jack it and not even give you any props?
No, they just swagger jack, just like I swagger jacked your lumberjack look. And in fact, you weren't wearing that shirt before we started. Let's be clear about this. This was absolutely a planned thing. I got the shirt on, which, to be fair, Suneil's rocked the lumberjack look before I have, but I've got the shirt on and he goes, hold on a second. Let's just make it a twin thing. I'm going to throw mine on. So we were a couple minutes late. You can blame Suneil because he also wanted to look like a lumberjack with me, which great decision, by the way. Great decision. My gosh. Hey, the chat is already like going crazy. Person. Shout out to you in the chat. Giants Niner fan says, aren't you guys cute matching? We got the argument already in the chat. Before we even started the show, by the way, is hilarious. The quarterback conundrum is on everybody's mind. There's so many different scenarios, and the waters got even more muddied. So before we talk about Brock Purdy and his performance and all those things, because we keep it fresh here, I have not talked to you about any of these things, and there's a reason for it. I want to know where you're coming at from a genuine perspective. I want to be able to react to it in real time. So we try not to talk about the topics. Topics come out very late, and then we just go live. So that being said, there is a bit of breaking news. It happened a couple hours ago, but news came out that Jimmy Garoppolo might not be done yet. He doesn't have Liz Frank, which thank God for that, by the way, because Liz Frank is a very serious injury, and that would have really messed with his future. So I'm very happy that he does not have Liz Frank. He has, sounds like, just a broken or fractured foot, which timeline for that is anywhere from 6 to 12 weeks, depending on who you listen to. What was your thoughts when you heard that Jimmy Garoppolo isn't quite done yet, potentially? Where did your mind go?
Yeah, I mean, same thoughts, right? Obviously, great news for Jimmy, just like as a man, as a football player, to know that, hey, his, like you said, the Liz Frank could be a career changing type injury, especially for a guy that isn't as mobile as or athletically gifted as maybe some other quarterbacks in the league. But great to see that. The first thing that came to my head, Jesse, and throughout this whole thing was, I don't know if you remember, and I think this was off camera, you talked about, what if there's a scenario where Jimmy gets injured? This was a while ago when the Trey Lance news came out that he could possibly be ready for the playoffs based off of his injury, right? And you were like, this is what's going to happen. Jimmy's going to get injured, and then Trey's going to come in and save the day. And then this news came out, and I was like, and my boy texted me, the Eagles fan, he texted me this news, and I was like, man, I think Trey could be ready too. I was like, we might have all three of our quarterbacks ready for the playoffs. That's what went through my head. Like, if we want quarterback drop, there's going to be another decision that needs to be made come playoff time. And I just know 49er faithful Twitter is going to be, it's never going to stop. Like, they give us enough content to constantly be at each other's throats. So I love it.
Yeah, I mean, 1,000,000%. And I think I probably talked about it off camera. It was more of like a in jest conversation. Is like, hey, what if? Like, how crazy would that be? Talk about a story. By the way, I want to throw this out there because I tweeted it out and it was going crazy. A cool little story about Brock Purdy, real quick. So he wears number 13 because he's a Dan Marino fan. All right. His first game he ever attended, he was actually a baby, but was brought to the game. It was the Dolphins versus the Jets, and that's why he wears number 13. So if you look at the way everything played out for Brock Purdy, week 13, he's wearing number 13, playing against the Dolphins with Dan Marino in attendance. What a cool story that is. How crazy is that? And not only to be able to play in that game, but play well and win it. I mean, that's incredible. So shout out to Brock Purdy. What a cool little way that worked out. And if anybody's on Twitter, I'm sure his mom and sisters and all them have a major following now, but they were going crazy on Twitter. It was really cool to see. And just a fun story. It sucks for Jimmy, and hopefully he comes back sooner than later, because right now Brock Purdy's it. And I'm not saying that, Jimmy should come in right away and start, but it would be nice to have Jimmy or Trey there with Brock Purdy, just in case something happens to any one of these guys. You want to have depth at that position. And so for me, overall, though, the story is just really, really cool. So anyways, that's my 2 cents on that. But yeah, as far as Jimmy goes, if I'm placing a wager on this, I'm going to say Jimmy doesn't come back. And I think there's a few reasons for this. First of all, let's take best case scenario. We're looking at 6 weeks, which 6 weeks would put him ready to be back for I almost said the Giants game, but for whoever they play in the wild card, ready to be back for that game. Giants, Seahawks, Washington, whoever. So he's probably not going to be put into the starting lineup right away. I think that would be a weird decision to make. Is he willing to be the backup? Is he going to try to rush to come back to be the backup? I don't know. And then if it's the 7 or 8 week, which is what's being reported, that's the divisional or NFC championship game. And if he plays and doesn't play well, which there's a high possibility of that, to just be thrown out after being out for that long, then what do you do to your stock going forward? Because he was playing really good football. And I think there's money out there to be had. But if the lasting memory is you going into the playoffs, maybe throwing up a major stinker and being sent home, I think that's a bad business decision. And Jimmy Garoppolo in the past has proven, whether through him or Don Yee, whoever, that they do make good business decisions when it comes to getting the most money. I have a hard time believing that he's going to come back based off of those things. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things at play, I think, going down that thought process. Kyle Shanahan is notorious for going with the hot hand, right? So this could all be moot if Brock Purdy goes out and he's playing well enough and this team is clicking on all cylinders. Then even Trey Lance could come back and probably would just be the backup if Brock Purdy is the hot hand, right? Because that's what Kyle Shanahan is notorious to do. Very similar to how Bill Belichick kind of runs his system. Whoever's the hot hand is gonna play. So there's that, but I would push back maybe a little bit from him not coming back to play being his decision. And the reason for that, this would be the second year that he wasn't able to finish the season. So it would be, or I guess he did finish it, but second year where he's coming off of an off season of an injury, right? So I think at that point, teams need to see him be able to come back and play well. Otherwise, I don't know how big the market is going to be for him, because we just saw what the market was for him off of an NFC championship, taking a team to the NFC championship, quote unquote, and having an off-season injury, right? This is one where he got injured in the season and couldn't finish the season. Like, what team is going to put big money into that if he can't see you come back and play well? So I think that it's different because at least last season he finished playing. This season, if he didn't finish playing, I think that would be a big deal against his stock moving forward.
I think that's a fair thought or assessment. I'll go the other way. I think it's different because last year, remember, we thought the thumb injury was actually the worst of the two injuries, and that ended up not being the case. Last year, he was able to play through the injury, and then all of a sudden, when it came time for free agency and these things to happen where a trade could actually go and take place, that's when the surgery was announced. And it was almost like, whoa, hold on. I thought this guy was healthy. I thought he just needed some rest. The thumb was the major injury. He elected not to get surgery there. What's going on? And now all of a sudden we've got surgery, which means he's not going to be ready for our training camp if we bring him in. And we don't know how that's going to impact his throwing. I mean, it's his throwing shoulder. And I think that is probably why we saw what we saw. Now, I do think that his stock drops with this injury. However, this is a bone break. And if he's fully healthy in 8 weeks and can immediately land on a team, also, the other factor is this: nobody has to trade for him. Last year, he had to be traded for. He had to be paid. He's coming off of a shoulder surgery. He's not going to have any time to prepare with that team. This year, he's going to have to be paid, but there is no yellow tape to go through as far as trading for him. You're not going to have to give up any assets. And he is going to be healthy and ready to go with your team very, very early on in the process. I think that the market is still there. Maybe not as much in your scenario, but enough to where it's like, okay, I think he could do more damage by coming back, potentially playing terrible. And then that's what is left in your mind. Like, okay, like you went into, you lost a third straight time when it mattered most. You threw for 175 yards at 60% and 2 interceptions. We're cool. Like, we're good on Jimmy Garoppolo. That's what I think actually could be worse. So that's just my opinion.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair assessment too. But I would look at it also from the human perspective. Mm-hmm. If I'm Jimmy Garoppolo and I'm looking at the team that I have around me on this team, this is the best chance to win a Super Bowl, man. Like, for any quarterback. So if I'm Trey, if I'm Jimmy, if I'm Brock Purdy, I'm trying to go into their rehabs and kicking over cans and stuff so they don't get healthy. Because any team, and this kind of is what was shown against Miami, which is a good defense and a good team. With the team that's around him, with this defense, with those offensive weapons, and with the coach of like Kyle Shanahan, any quarterback's looking good. Mr. Irrelevant is looking now like half of 49er faithful are like, this is the guy. This is the guy. He's better than Trey. It's like, bruh, anybody would look good in this system with this coach, with this talent around him. So
yeah, it'll be interesting. I think a lot of it comes down to how Purdy's playing. If Purdy is playing well and Jimmy, you're not going to just throw Jimmy in there. I'm sorry. He's not going to walk in after being cold for 6 weeks and take over the starting job. It's just not going to happen. And so I think that plays into it. If they limp into the playoffs and Purdy's not playing well at all, then it's like, okay, maybe in that scenario, I could see where Jimmy's like, all right, I can come in, be the savior, maybe win a Super Bowl and really bet on myself and make the stock rise. But if it's like, hey, you're not going to be the starter, but we'd love to have you for this run, it's like, yeah, I'm cool. Like, I'll sit. You know what I mean? I'm not coming in to be the backup. Like, I'll just sit and get ready for the offseason. So we'll see how it plays out. You
don't think there's any chance Trey comes back?
We can talk about that. Yeah, I think that's a completely different scenario. I do think that there's a chance that Trey could come back, and people get so mad. It's, you know, what's funny, Suneil, and this, I love this. This is what's great about our fan base. It's funny to me that the actual starter of this team, let's remember that the actual starter of this team is Trey Lance. It's not Jimmy Garoppolo. Regardless of what people want to say, he was handed the job. He didn't earn it. He's not better. He's blah, blah, blah. The actual starting quarterback of this team is Trey Lance. So when you talk about Trey Lance coming back, it's like, oh, you can't do that. No way you can talk about Trey Lance coming back. What are we doing? Why would we do that? He's not good. It's this. Is that nobody wants to hear that conversation. Well, Kyle Shanahan shut him down for the season. There's no chance. Well, when he was pinned down and actually asked, is there a possibility? It's like, well, right now the medical staff's saying no, so I'm going to say no, but hell yeah, I want him back. Come on, man. I knew that was the case the whole time. And I got people getting so mad when I bring it up. You don't know what you're talking about. And why would they do that? And blah, blah. But the moment that Jimmy Garoppolo gets injured, it's not only, oh, he's coming back, but after 6 weeks, getting ready for a wild card game, divisional game, or NFC championship, he better be the starter. A word? Because Jimmy Garoppolo is the backup quarterback. So the backup quarterback better come in and get his job back after sitting for 6 to 8 weeks, even if it's in the middle of a postseason run. But Trey Lance doesn't get. Come on, man. Like, let's stay consistent. Stay consistent. That's all I ask. What I said from the beginning was Trey Lance, I believe, has an opportunity to come back. However, he should not come back as the starter if the starter at that time, Jimmy Garoppolo, is playing good football. I don't want to see him thrown into that situation, but I do want the best players available just in case something were to happen. Well, now something's happened to Jimmy Garoppolo. And I would be more comfortable because if Trey Lance comes back, it's not going to be for the wild card round. We're going to know here in the next 3 weeks. I would be more comfortable with Trey Lance coming back in 3 weeks, having a couple weeks to prepare, and then playing in week 18. Hopefully, it's not a must-win game at all. It's just, hey, get out there, get some reps. We're sitting our starters type of situation. Give him those reps, assess the situation, and play whoever you want between him and Purdy. If he's the backup, great. But I would feel okay about that situation versus, oh, we're just going to bring in Jimmy in 7 weeks after they've won a wild card game with Brock Purdy and he's the starter. No. Have we not learned our lesson at all with Jimmy Garoppolo? Like, let's really look at things. Not only is Jimmy Garoppolo not great in the playoffs, but he's not great coming off of injury. In fact, the 3 games that he's had coming off of injury have been really, really bad. He hasn't played well. You look at the Miami game in 2020, 7 of 17, 77 yards and 2 interceptions. 2021, he comes back after the injury, after the bye week, playing against Indy, 16 of 27, 181 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. The best game that he played coming off of injury was week 18 last year against the Rams, where he was 23 of 32, 316 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. But that was after missing just 1 week. If he misses multiple weeks, it's proven he doesn't play well. And then you're going to expect it ramped up in the playoffs where he also doesn't play well. I'm sorry, this isn't math. Math, 2 negatives make a positive. Not in this scenario. You got 2 negatives. I think we know how that story ends. So I find it interesting that people aren't willing to keep it consistent when we're talking about one quarterback or the other. It's just super funny to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I would be extremely excited about Trey being available. Whether or not he's ready to play, obviously that's for the coaching staff to decide.
Yep.
And, practice will show and the team will know which guy they feel more comfortable going out with. But it's just, I think if Jimmy was playing, they don't like if Trey, because earlier, Coach Shanahan was like, Trey's not coming back. Right. But in that mind, he had Jimmy for the whole season. Brock Purdy was going to be the backup. They felt fine. Right. Now with Brock Purdy only being there and Josh Johnson as the backup, if Trey can come back, right, which he seems like he's looking good. He's already throwing the ball, like doing stuff. It's like, all right, well, now Kyle Shanahan has to look at what's the best option for my team. And having Trey's got to be better than Josh Johnson. Right. And, if he's better than Brock Purdy off of an injury, that's at least I think Kyle Shanahan would want him in practices to find out if that's true. And at the end of the day, Shanahan wants to win a Super Bowl. I don't think he's worried about next season or how it's going to look to the fan base and all that kind of stuff. This is a great team. They have a lot of momentum. And he thinks that, I know he feels like this is a great shot to win a Super Bowl with the defense as constituted as what it is. He's going to put the best quarterback out there that he has on his roster that's healthy. So
yeah, and
we
I
could
agree
argue
with
about
that.
who
By
it
the
is.
way, I would be excited for Trey to come back. I would also be excited for Jimmy to come back. Again, I want depth. just in case something happens. There's no guarantee that now Purdy's going to stay healthy. Why would we assume that Purdy, who is small in stature and likes to run around in the pocket a little bit, is going to stay fully healthy? Hopefully he does, but if he's not able to, whether it's Trey coming back to be the starter or the backup, or Jimmy coming back to be the starter or the backup, just having two competent quarterbacks on this team, we can slice it however we want. But we all can agree that Purdy, Jimmy, and Trey, regardless of what they're coming back from and what the scenario is, are better than Josh Johnson. So that's all I need to know. If I can have two of them going into this playoff run, I feel a lot better about the situation, just like I would love to have Elijah Mitchell back as an option. I feel great about the running backs, but I also know the running back position gets injured often on this team, and we don't know what's going to happen. I would much rather see Elijah Mitchell than TDP at this point if push come to shove. So, yeah, I would be excited about either one of these quarterbacks coming back, whether they're here to start or they're here to come off the bench. I just think, personally, if Purdy is playing well, that you roll with the hot hand regardless. That's me, but we'll see how it plays out. And I agree with Philip. Regardless, whoever the last quarterback is that's standing, can they just win the Super Bowl? Yeah, that's fantastic. I'll take that. Giants Niner fan says, I'm so burnt out on the Jimmy G era, 5+ years of drama. Let's move on already. Yeah, I think one thing that happened here is if Purdy can play well down the stretch, even anything close to what he's played, I think that we've shut the door on the Jimmy G era. And so there's some clarity there. They are certainly going to feel a lot more comfortable moving forward with Purdy going into his second year, Trey Lance going into his third, and letting those two quarterbacks figuring it out from there. The Jimmy G thing is most likely done at this point. So you might get your wish, Giants Niner fan. You might just get your wish. Dustin says, I still don't get how Jimmy could be back for the playoffs, but Trey is still out for the season. This is sus. And that's what I'm saying. That, again, it's just funny. It's funny, the double standards. It's so wild to me how we can get so upset when you bring up the starter of the actual team, when you talk about him coming back. And by the way, I understand if the thought is, hey, I just want to make sure that Trey is fully ready to go. He's the future of this team. Let's give him all the rest time that we can and allow him to get ready for next year. I'm cool if that's your stance, but that's not the friction that I'm met with. The friction I'm met with is he's not good enough. He's not ready. Shanahan said he can't play. It's like, miss me with all that. Miss me with all that. Riddy says, keep up the good work, guys. Niners, thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Okay, well, let's actually talk about the quarterback who's playing on the team, maybe for at least the foreseeable future. And that's Brock Purdy. What are your overall thoughts on what you saw from Brock Purdy on Sunday?
Yeah, I mean, look, he played well enough to get the victory. I think he made some throws that I was like, wow, those are some great throws. The one in the end zone that ended up getting dropped, but he fitted into that tight window. Seems like he has some anticipation. Seems like he's confident, which I think is really good for a quarterback. Like, he's willing to make throws that he sees, and seems like he has the accuracy and the arm strength to be able to do that. Yeah, I mean, I was pleasantly surprised. I haven't seen much of Brock Purdy. I saw a little bit of him obviously in the preseason, but this was impressive for him to jump up in a game against a quality opponent like Miami is. I think that defense is, a better defense. They don't get as much credit as they deserve. And, he played well. And, if he's the starting quarterback going forward, obviously I'm going to rally behind him, and we'll see how it is, like, off of just straight adrenaline. And now we get to see how he is, like, installing a game plan and all of that against a very desperate team in Tampa Bay. We're going to see how he performs.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised as well. Here's the thing. I've got messages and tweets out there from December of 2020 talking about Brock Purdy and wanting him to be a 49er. And I was willing to spend a third or a fourth round pick to make it happen if he came out for that year. Now, what ended up happening is he didn't come out for that year. He didn't enter the draft. The 49ers ended up trading to number 3 and then taking Trey Lance. But I've really liked Brock Purdy now for a couple of years. Having said that, I was still worried that he would not be able to come in and do enough to beat the Dolphins. Once Jimmy went down, I had apprehension, but he quickly changed my mind on that. And he played exactly how I've seen him play for the last couple of years in college and showed exactly why I wanted him to be a 49er. However, mixed in with that, I still know he has limitations. I see why he was passed on now for 7 rounds. I think his draft stock dropped from his junior year to his senior year, and I think that there's reasons for that. But I think Brock Purdy is a capable quarterback and a long-term backup quarterback in this league, and a guy that I would be excited to have on my team for a long time, regardless, because sometimes you need your backup quarterback to come in and win games. And the 49ers are in that scenario right now with their third string. But going forward, I think Brock Purdy is a very capable backup quarterback, and I'm excited to see what he does. I think him getting this experience is only good for the 49ers long-term, because we know that he is in their long-term plans in some capacity or another. And when I say long-term, the next 3 or 4 years. So yeah, I loved what I saw from Brock Purdy. I think that there's a lot of questions out there as far as how far can he take this team. We're going to talk about that in a second. But I'm interested to see what Brock Purdy brings to the table for sure.
Yeah. I mean, he seems like a gunslinger, right? So there are going to be obviously more opportunities for turnovers and things like that. But I think ultimately he's in the perfect situation. And we mentioned that for any quarterback, whether it was Trey, whether it was Jimmy, and now Brock Purdy. This is a quarterback's dream. You're surrounded by all pros. You have what's coming back to offensive genius in Kyle Shanahan, who's putting together good game plans and whatnot. And you have the best defense in the league. Like, any competent quarterback is going to be able to win with this roster. So I think it's more about the others around him than the quarterback at this point. So yeah, I think they'll be fine as long as the other pieces around him are able to play and play well.
Yeah, definitely. And let's talk about it for a little bit here. Does Brock Purdy playing well, in your opinion, change at all how you view Kyle and or Jimmy, or should it change the perception on how people view those two?
I mean, I think it solidifies for me that all of the hate that Kyle Shanahan gets is blasphemy. The fact that Kyle Shanahan has such a good team and system and scheme that Mr. Irrelevant could come in and beat a team that some people believe is a capable Super Bowl team from the AFC is insane. Like, the fact that we look at Mr. Irrelevant as a possible starting quarterback and people are excited about that this is happening. Like, is it really the quarterback, or is it everything that's going around the quarterback? The fact that the defense scored 14 points, the fact that Christian McCaffrey had the game that he had, the fact that Debo was making the plays that Debo was making. Like, it's just, I think that at a certain point, and look, I gotta take some accountability, because I let you guys talk me off of the fence all the time when I'm on this Kyle Shanahan thing, and I need to just stop. I need to stop, and I just need to stop wavering. Kyle Shanahan is the man. Like, the things that, like, we are so spoiled with him as our coach that it's just like we could talk about all this kind of stuff. I tweeted it. When have we ever seen that isn't a movie with Al Pacino as the coach, where the third stringer could come in and the team still be competitive? Like, Brock Purdy is not Willie Beeman, but somehow the team is still able to be there. And there's still, like, nobody's sitting there being like, yeah, the 49ers aren't going to make the playoffs because Brock Purdy is the quarterback. No, they're still like, this defense is phenomenal. The weapons are elite. And it's just wild to me. To me, this is gold star for Kyle Shanahan. And yeah, I think it does diminish Jimmy a little bit, because it shows that any capable quarterback can look good in the system and get wins. So Brock Purdy goes off and rattles off an undefeated season. All of a sudden, is he the new Jimmy G? Where everybody's like, well, he wins, so he's the right, like, you know what I mean? Like, at what point? I think it just negates this whole quarterback win percentage type thing, and it's just like, all right, at a certain point, it's just the team around the quarterback.
Yeah, for me, it doesn't change my opinion on either one, to be real with you, because look at what Kyle Shanahan did with Nick Mullins. I mean, Nick Mullins in his first 16 starts is a top 4 quarterback of all time. In fact, go look at Nick Mullins' first start and what he did against the Raiders. He lit them up more so than even Brock Purdy did with the Dolphins. This isn't anything new. We've seen this from backup quarterbacks with the 49ers under Kyle Shanahan. So for me, it doesn't change my opinion about Kyle at all. It does, and it's too early to change my opinion about Jimmy. Listen, I think a lot of people would label me a Jimmy hater, which I think is completely off base. I think I've been very fair with who Jimmy Garoppolo is. I've never once called him a backup quarterback. I've never once said he couldn't start in this league. I've just talked about his limitations. And to me, those limitations are not ones that you can overcome to win a Super Bowl or for him to be good enough to be the long-term quarterback. But that's not hating. That's just giving my opinion on who I think Jimmy is. However, in this scenario, Brock Purdy, again, a guy that I've loved now for multiple years on record since 2020, he did great things on Sunday, but to say that he's better than Jimmy all of a sudden, like, I'm not going to go that far. I think that's a little too early for all that. You know, everybody talks about, well, once Brock Purdy gets time to prepare as the starter, imagine how much better he'll be. Well, there's a flip side of that. Wait till he's 3-4 games in and people have film on him.
Right. They
realize his limitations. Is he still going to be this good? So I think it goes both ways. Sure, if he continues to play this way and they win, 4 of the next 5 or whatever it is that's left, then yeah, absolutely. Then you could maybe start to change your opinion about Jimmy G and, wow, maybe Purdy's better. Whatever. We can start having those conversations possibly then. But for now, no. My opinion doesn't change on either one of them. I have a pretty good feeling or pretty good pulse on who both of them are. And I have a good pulse on what I think Brock Purdy is and can be. And, I think it's fine. I think Jimmy is still a starting level quarterback in this league. I think Brock Purdy is probably still a backup in this league. And I think Kyle Shanahan is one of the better schemers and play designers in this league who still has some issues when it comes to being an overall head coach. And for me, my opinion on those things really hasn't changed yet. We'll see. As time goes on, we'll see how it goes. Abu says, our 2 lowest PFF grades versus Miami, Hufanga, 29.7. Gibson, 40.2, lost in all the praise for our defenses. How our safeties struggle with speed might prove to be our Achilles heel when it counts. Yeah, I don't think we talked about it here when we went behind enemy lines last week, Abu, but I did talk about it when I went on to the Dolphins channel, and he asked me, how do you think this defense can be beat? How can Miami put up points against them? And I said, for me, I think they can be beat deep still. They don't have a lot of speed on the back end, and they do take chances. And that showed to be true. Luckily, it didn't cost them the game, but yeah, that's certainly still a thing. Listen, Hufanga's really, really good, and Gibson's playing really good. But it doesn't mean that you don't have weaknesses, and that would be their weakness right now. Hufanga has to be more disciplined. He has to be more disciplined. He's a bit of a risk taker, and more often than not, it plays out really well. And there's a reason why he's basically matched what Jaquiski Tartt has done for his whole career as far as forced interceptions. But there's also a reason why people like Tartt over Hufanga, and that was because of stability. Now, I'm taking Hufanga 11 times out of 10 over Tartt, but he's a risk taker. And so he's definitely going to have to clean that up. And I think the more he plays, let's not forget he's in his second year. The more he plays, he will clean that up. But yeah, it's certainly there's weaknesses. There's weaknesses to be had. And, guys like Mahomes and Allen, they can take advantage of those weaknesses. And they're not the only ones. Faithful Jinx says, do they put Jimmy G on IR? If so, who do they use those last 2 IR spots on? I don't think I would put Jimmy G on IR. If there's a chance that he can come back, if there's a legitimate chance he can come back, you won't see him go to IR because they want to save those spots for Mitchell and Kinlaw, hopefully, maybe Trey Lance, but you don't want to put him on IR. If he goes on IR, I think that pretty much answers the question that Jimmy G's not coming back. That would be my opinion. So I would be shocked if he goes to IR if reports are true that he could come back in as early as 7 weeks, but we'll see how they play it. Alejandro says Kyle's ultimate test is now to develop rookie quarterbacks. That I agree with. I'm curious to see how not only that Trey Lance, but Brock Purdy also develops long term. And then last one before we get to the next topic, Gray Fox says the 49ers Super Bowl movie is going to be amazing. Hell, if they win a Super Bowl this year, you're right. That's a hell of a documentary series. I mean, just think about everything from the beginning. The trade to go up and get Trey Lance behind the scenes, what did that look like? Why did they choose to do that? The decision not to start him right away and bring back Jimmy. And then fast forward to Jimmy getting hurt, should be off the team. He sticks around. Trey Lance goes down. Jimmy G goes down. Purdy comes in. So many cool storylines. So many cool storylines. That would be a hell of a docuseries for sure in the future. So I would look forward to that one, no doubt. Okay. I think the ultimate question is this. Let's assume that Brock Purdy is the guy for the rest of the year. I know how your opinions were when Trey Lance went down and Jimmy G was here and what your thoughts were of the Super Bowl window. Do the 49ers chances change with Purdy based off of what you thought it was with Jimmy? And go ahead and recap what you thought their chances were with Jimmy and then talk about why that doesn't change with Brock Purdy.
Yeah, I thought that the chances didn't change with Jimmy because I felt like the team around them was so elite that we had already seen Jimmy be able to take a team far, win with Jimmy. Team was comfortable with Jimmy. Jimmy was comfortable in the offense. So I didn't really see the chances go down. With Brock Purdy, I don't know if I'm as confident just because I haven't seen much of him, right? So I don't know what he's going to be like. I haven't watched a lot of college tape on him. I don't know who he is as a quarterback other than what we saw in the preseason. So, I mean, clearly he could come out and when the pressure's on, lead a team to a victory, but it also helps when your defense scores 14 points and the offensive line on the other side is missing their 2 starting tackles and the quarterback had the worst game they've ever played, in the NFL. So was that just a perfect storm, or is that like what we can expect from a Brock Purdy led 49ers team? Yet to be determined. I think the chances at the end of the day are going to be once again based off of how Kyle Shanahan schemes it up for Brock Purdy. We've seen this team be able to make it to, win playoff games when their quarterback only attempts to throw the ball 8 times, right? So we know that what this team and what this coaching staff is capable of. I think this is the best defense that Kyle Shanahan has ever had. This is the most opportunistic defense that Kyle Shanahan has ever had, which is obviously makes it easier to play offense for this team. So overall, I'm going to say the chances haven't dropped to where I think it's the chances have gone lower, Jesse, but not significantly because I've always felt the rest of this team is the reason why this team is Super Bowl bound versus whoever's playing quarterback.
Yeah, my opinion hasn't changed. And if you remember, my opinion was, I did jokingly say that, yep, my opinion changed. They better go win a Super Bowl. And I said that jokingly and in jest because that's what I was told, is that the window was closed with Trey Lance and they're wasting their time. And so I was like, listen, you guys wanted Jimmy. You said that he would win a Super Bowl and that was their best chance to do so. So it better happen. And so that's my expectation. But reality of the situation is that is not how I felt. I did not think they could win a Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo. I was pretty obvious about that. And my opinion is not going to change with Brock Purdy playing. I think that they can still go pretty far. I think they can win a lot of games. And unless Brock Purdy is all of a sudden somebody who I didn't know he was, after watching a lot of Brock Purdy for the last couple of years and liking Brock Purdy, that's the only way that it's going to happen. So for me, my opinion was they couldn't win a Super Bowl with Jimmy and they wouldn't win a Super Bowl with Jimmy. And I just said that my opinion of Jimmy didn't change based off of Brock Purdy playing one good game. Very impressed with what he did. I don't think Brock Purdy is that guy either. And so my opinion is not going to change here. I think that would be disingenuous of me to all of a sudden crown Purdy and say, yes, my opinions change. They can win a Super Bowl with Purdy, but they couldn't with Jimmy. I don't think that would be fair at all. And so my opinion personally has not changed.
So let's delve into this a little bit because we both thought this defense was going to be good, Jesse.
Yeah.
I don't know if we thought it was going to be this good, right? Would you agree? Like they're playing better than what we expected them to be playing, even though we did have high hopes for them?
Yeah, I would say slightly better. I did say before the season that this was the best secondary the 49ers had since 1994. So I had high expectations. We already knew what the defensive line was and the linebackers were. I thought the secondary was that good. However, to be fair, what they've done in allowing 7 second half points in the last 5 games, I don't think anybody thought they would be that good. So yes, it's fair. I thought they would be good, but they're like all-time good right now to a certain extent. So yes, that's
so. And the reason why I'm saying that is the reason why we thought Jimmy couldn't win a Super Bowl. The reason why you probably think Brock can't win a Super Bowl at this time is eventually there was going to be a time where the offense had to maybe carry or had to be able to put up a certain amount of points because eventually this defense wasn't going to be able to hold, the great quarterbacks, whether it be Mahomes, whether it be Allen, whether it be whomever, to a certain point total, right? I don't know if I believe that obviously everything would have to go perfect, but I do see a path where this defense is much like the Ravens defenses that won Super Bowls when they didn't have a quarterback, like when it was not when it was Flacco, but the other guy,
Trent
Dilfer, where the defense can do 90% of the job to win the Super Bowl, and the quarterback just doesn't have to mess up because of the running game, because of the weapons and all that kind of stuff. You don't see a path where the 49ers could win with the quarterback just being the ultimate game manager and the talent around them can do everything else to win a Super Bowl? Or do you think that the defense isn't good enough to shut down opposing teams' offenses?
I still think that if you go up against an elite quarterback, I'm talking top of the line quarterback, best of the best, those teams can still put up points on this defense. As great as it is, I think, and it's tough to say because, the evidence is kind of there. To be fair, they were still very injured in the Chiefs game. This is the healthiest the defense has been since probably around week 3. So I'm not going to say it's impossible to hold those teams down, but it's a completely different beast to do it against a Tua and a top-notch offense led by Tua versus a top-notch offense led by Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes. Those are completely different animals. And even I think even Herbert showed that to a certain extent. What they put, how many points did they put on us?
21, something like that.
I don't remember what it was, but they were able to put up, as I think maybe they got to 17 as well, but him with no weapons was still able to move the ball for a little bit on this defense. And then once his final weapon finally went out in the second half, that was it. But I feel like the game now versus something like the 2000 Ravens is so different. It's so different. The rule changes are so slanted towards the offensive side of the ball that when you just get an all-time talent like a Patrick Mahomes or a Josh Allen, it's going to be very hard. And then the flip side of that is if you play a Buffalo Bills team that's healthy, they've also got a top 3 defense. So not only do they have Josh Allen, but then they've got a top 3 defense that can go against your Jimmy Garoppolo, Brock Purdy, basically a rookie Trey Lance. regardless of who the quarterback is, I think that it makes it very, very hard to win in those scenarios because you've got the elite quarterback, but then you've also got a great defense. And even Cincy, to a certain extent, I don't think Burrow's on their level, but Burrow with those weapons can certainly be dangerous. And their defense is pretty damn good too. So I don't know, man. I just don't see it. I don't see it. You know, that's me.
Well, I do think that there's a path just because I think this defense is doing things that I didn't expect. Scoring, the turnovers that they're able to get. Like, I agree. Like, I mean, against Miami, missing your 2 starting tackles, obviously your defensive line is going to be able to put a lot of pressure on a quarterback in that situation. But I don't know, man. The things that they're doing are unheard of for a defense. And I think when you have a defense that's feeling themselves with that much talent, you have all pros all over the offense. It's different. Like it's not a normal situation, man. Like I don't know how we could quantify it, but like a great quarterback, you like a guy like Patrick Mahomes can make up for deficiencies of players, like a defense that isn't as good, offensive line that isn't as good, not having as many weapons. But I think if you have all of those things in place, all pro at fullback, all pro at running back, all pro at left tackle, all pro at wide receiver, all pro at tight end, you don't have to make up for much as a quarterback because you have all of the talent there. So I think that like that's where it's a little bit different of situation. Then on top of that, you put a defense that could consistently hold the opposing offense to under their average. I mean, in that world, I think anything could happen. And the fact is the 49ers have that perfect storm where I think that they necessarily don't need some kind of crazy quarterback to elevate a team. I think if the team plays the way that they're capable of, they just need a quarterback that'll stay out of the way. And I think Brock Purdy is capable of that. So it's interesting.
Most definitely. Here's what I'll say. I look at history, and we've talked about it on the show. I'm not going to go all the way through the history, but history certainly shows that elite quarterbacks win way more often than not. There are the outliers. And even in those outliers, Trent Dilfer is probably the last real guy. You can make an argument for Peyton Manning as well, actually. Peyton Manning was pretty shot down the stretch. But, those are the last real guys that didn't have to do anything. But when you look at even guys like Flacco or Foles, when they had to start, man, those guys not only had to make a big play to overcome these teams, they went on a big stretch. Those guys put together 2 of the best postseasons of really any quarterback. It's not like they just went in and it was like, okay, well, they're bad quarterbacks and they win. People point to those guys. What about Foles? Well, what about Flacco? Hold up for a second. Go look at those numbers. I mean, Flacco, if I remember correctly, was throwing for over 300 yards a game in the playoffs, 11 touchdowns and 0 interceptions in 4 games. Nick Foles was doing the same thing. He had 1 less game, and I want to say he had 6 or 7 touchdowns to 1 interception in 3 games. They both played elite level football for a stretch. I don't think, and it was the same reason that I said I didn't think Jimmy could do it. I'm not going to say that Brock Purdy can do it. And so for those reasons, it's really hard for me to say. And even then, you look at Eli Manning overcoming the Patriots. At some point, most of the time, whether you're an elite quarterback or you're not an elite quarterback, what separates winning and losing a Super Bowl is at some point, your quarterback is going to have to make a play. They're going to have to. They have to make a play. And do I trust Mr. Irrelevant to make that play when it matters most? That's hard. I mean.
And what I'm saying is,
you're saying they won't have to make that play because the team.
No. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that they won't have to make the play. I'm saying it's less about the quarterback making the play versus the quarterback giving a shot to the playmakers that they have that can make that play, right? So you just have to throw it in the vicinity of Ayuk. You just have to throw it in the vicinity of Debo. You just have to throw it in the vicinity of McCaffrey and let them go make the play. That's what I'm saying. Whereas like it's different because those quarterbacks, they had to make some crazy play to a wide receiver that nobody knew who that guy's name was from the Giants and, all that kind of stuff. But it's different when you have all pros at that, right? You know, and
For
that's
sure.
what I'm saying is like it's not going to be so much on the quarterback making that play. It's going to be like you just have to do your job and let the talent around you elevate you, kind of thing. And I don't, all of those situations that you talked about didn't have the amount of all pros that whoever's quarterbacking this team has. And I mean, maybe the Ravens had that level of defense, and the Eagles defense was pretty good as well. But and definitely the Denver defense was good that year. But
Yeah, that
this
Denver
defense, I
defense.
would say, this defense is right up there with all of those other defenses. So that's what I'm saying. Like they can carry it, especially with the amount of talent on the offense to make up for maybe deficiencies in quarterback. That's all I'm saying. It would have to be a damn near perfect game, but
Yeah,
I'm
it
just
would.
saying like it doesn't have to be like this ridiculous game. They just don't make any mistakes, and I think the team around you could elevate you.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. I think if you can get a quarterback that can go into the playoffs and just play mistake-free football, your chances elevate a million times over. So I understand what you're saying. I'll leave it at this too. The other thing is this: you can hold down a Patrick Mahomes or a Josh Allen for a majority of a game, but if they have a chance to go win it and you give them at least 30 seconds, they've both proven it, not just against each other last year, but multiple times now this year. That's all
Mm-hmm.
they need. You give them 30 seconds in the ball. If you're not up by at least 9, there's a good chance that you're going to overtime or you're losing that game. So
Right.
that's the scary part. And the 49ers just don't have that. And at some point, like that's a likely scenario. Even if you're beating these teams, you're not going to blow them out because of some of the limitations that you have at the quarterback position. So even if you're beating them, chances are they're going to get a chance with the game on the line. And I don't like our chances, regardless of how good this defense is. I do not like our chances in that scenario. I just don't.
Yeah.
All
I
right.
mean, well, time will tell.
For sure. Yeah, and that's the great thing is we're going to find out. And being a fan, I want to be wrong. Like,
Yeah.
please prove me wrong. I would love nothing more than that. But I'm going to be real. I'm going to tell you exactly how I feel. And in this scenario, I don't like the chances at all. So let's talk about this because this has been a topic as well. Brock Purdy's playing so well. He did things in that game that we haven't seen from Trey Lance. Have you seen the poise of Brock Purdy? Can Purdy be the long-term answer for this team, in your opinion?
There's people that always trash me and guys like me and you and stuff like that. We go back to one game that Trey Lance had against Houston that we say tells us everything we needed to know that Trey Lance could be the answer for the 49ers, right? And we get trashed that it was one game. What, like, what else has he done? There's not enough tape. Like, he hasn't been able to do anything since then, all that kind of stuff. My answer is, can Purdy be the long-term solution? Our answer is, I don't know. He would have to be the second coming of Tom Brady for that to happen because he was picked lower than Tom Brady was picked. Do I think he has that capability? I don't know. I don't know enough about him. Can we say it based off of this one game? Look, we've seen quarterbacks come out and have a great one game, come in and do that and not really amount to anything. We've seen Nick Foles go out and have a Super Bowl run and win a Super Bowl coming in. And where's Nick Foles now? Nobody knows what team he's playing for. Is he a starter anywhere? No, he couldn't even beat Justin Fields, out as a starter for the Bears. So I would say probably not, right? Because where he was drafted, the fact that he was, third string when all the quarterbacks were healthy, right? He was on the practice squad. I don't know if that is the path to where a long-term solution could be. I kind of tend to think that, you're kind of, people know what you're going to be earlier in your career as far as, the ceiling, right? And it's more the exception to the rule than the rule if Brock Purdy became the guy. So I'm going to say probably not, but we'll find out.
Before I give my answer, I want to read these super chats real quick. C. Turley says, What would America's team, the title, be if we win the Super Bowl? The shit show of 2022 49ers? Yeah, I don't know, man. That I'm sure you guys can be a lot more witty when it comes to something clever there. I don't have one for you, but it'll be interesting to see what they call them. But I like Edgardo's response here, and probably not directly to yours, but if Purdy wins a Super Bowl, I can see it already. The Mr. Irrelevant as a movie, 1000%. Of course, that's a movie. No doubt about it. And it's a hell of a movie to write. I think it's an easy script. And we already know who's going to play it. It's going to be E from what was the HBO show back in the day?
Entourage.
Entourage. It's going to be E from Entourage is playing that character. So that, no doubt about it. And Gray Fox says Debo is heating up at the right time. He had a low-key great game. The way he avoided that 14-yard loss was just amazing. Gray Fox, I agree with you. He seems like he's starting to hit a stride. I know people want to look at the numbers, but the way he played was completely different. And I said going into that game, he was the one that had to have a good game in order for them to win. And I feel like he lived up to that. I think he did his thing for sure. They were able to win that game. As far as can Brock Purdy be the long-term answer, I'm not going to say no 100% he can't be. However, again, this is not coming from just watching one game, okay? This is me telling you that I've liked Brock Purdy since 2020, all right? I want to make that very clear. If I haven't already, I've liked him for 2 years. I wanted him to be a 49er going into the 2020 draft. He didn't declare himself as eligible for the draft, and it didn't happen. They were able to get him at a much later price, and I'm cool with that. I love Brock Purdy. But I also know what his limitations are, and there are limitations aplenty with Brock Purdy. This happens in the league a lot. Earlier this year, wasn't there a controversy? Should Dak even come back? Does he deserve his job? Because they got Cooper Rush. Look at Cooper Rush. Not only for a game, he played well for a few games. And then, he got about 4 or 5 starts in, went against a division opponent, and it all fell apart because he has limitations, and he's only as good as he's going to be. There's a reason he was drafted late. There's not very many Joe Montanas and Tom Brady's floating around. Usually, if you're drafted late, there's a reason for it. And, Cooper Rush was a nice story, but Dak should be the starter, and that proved out pretty quickly. Bailey Zappi was another one. Look at Bailey Zappi. He's better than Mac Jones. And I joked about it. That was pretty funny to me to talk about Bailey Zappi. All you Mac Jones lovers, it was pretty funny to troll on that one. But come on, man. And now the new one is Mike White. Look at Mike White. And I'm not big on Zach Wilson. He might be better than Zach Wilson. I don't know. But Mike White is not the answer long term. I'm sorry. Hell, if the Jets have a chance to get Jimmy Garoppolo next year, I bet you they get Jimmy Garoppolo over Mike White. Mike White's a cool story. They're all wearing the T-shirts. They support him. Mike White got low-key exposed this last week. It only took 2 weeks. So let's pump the brakes on a good game with the last pick in the draft. Can we do that a little bit? I get it. I've seen the chat. I've seen everybody going in. Trey's a bust. Yo, the Texans game, y'all think he's a savior. These things are not built the same, okay? It's funny to me that when we look at Trey Lance, the same people that are saying Purdy's the answer, Glock Purdy, all the nicknames that they're coming up with, the same people that are saying he's the answer are the ones saying that Trey Lance is a bust. And I find that funny because you down talk the Texans game. A game that they had to win to make the playoffs, by the way, because it was just the Texans. The Dolphins' defense is not good. The Dolphins' defense is not good. They're not. Brock Purdy looked good. But even then, we take it a step further and look at how good Brock is, so efficient and this and that. He had 14 more attempts than Trey Lance had in that Texans game. He threw for less yards. They both had 2 touchdowns and 1 interception. Trey Lance played pretty damn good in that game. And by the way, the degree of difficulty was very different. Trey Lance had 15 attempts beyond 10 yards down the field. And 15 out of his, I think it was 23 pass attempts. That's happened one time in the last 29 games outside of Trey Lance for Jimmy Garoppolo. What Trey Lance is asked to do because of his physical capabilities, he throws downfield at an extremely high clip. In fact, that was the highest that the 49ers had seen from a percentage standpoint since I think 2016 or 15. They are not the same. The game plan going from Garoppolo to Purdy is pretty much the same. We're going to play a very similar brand of football. When Trey Lance gets in, it's like, okay, now we're pushing this ball down the field. We're going to air it out because of what he's capable of. So if you look at, in fact, I got a stat for you. Jimmy Garoppolo in the last 2 years, including the playoffs, has thrown 19 interceptions. 12 of those 19 interceptions have come when he throws past 10 yards downfield. There's a reason they don't ask Jimmy Garoppolo to do that, because he's not good at it. And Purdy's no different. Trust me, Purdy's arm is not going to hold up when he starts having to make those power throws down the middle of the field, 20, 25 yards, when he has to make a 15-yard out pattern from the far hash. Teams are going to pick up on this. They will. They always do. He's a cool story. I love Brock Purdy. I hope Brock Purdy kills it. I hope that by the time they figure it out, it's too late for the rest of the league and the 49ers have made a run to a Super Bowl. But I also know what his limitations are. I know what Trey's limitations are. Trey has a lot of improving to do. I don't know if he's ever going to reach his potential. But I can tell you one thing. Brock Purdy is a hell of a lot closer to his potential than Trey Lance. A hell of a lot closer. And if both of them reach their potential, it's not even close who the better player is. It's Trey Lance, and it is not even close. So let's pump the brakes a little bit. No, I do not think Brock Purdy can be the long-term answer. Am I saying it's impossible? No, but highly unlikely. And I know a lot about Brock Purdy, a lot about Brock Purdy. It's not just one game for me. It's not just this 49ers season for me. I've had my eye on him for multiple years. I know a lot about Brock Purdy, and I like what I've seen as a backup quarterback long-term, not the answer. All right, 49ers throwback. You give up on Trey? No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. All right, let's talk about this Dolphins win, because this Dolphins win was a big one. Huge win. Major bragging rights. And what did I say, by the way? I'm pretty sure that I talked about social media and Twitter spaces and how this rivalry heated up between 49er fans and Dolphins fans. In fact, Suneil, you talked about it last week.
Yeah.
However, Dolphins fans were real quiet after this loss. They were nowhere to be found. They were blocking everybody on Twitter. They weren't allowing us to come and talk in their spaces. They weren't showing up in our spaces. They wanted no smoke after all the trash they had talked. So I was so happy to get this win. But the question is does this win legitimize the San Francisco 49ers as they go to make this playoff push, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I think they had already been legitimized after what this defense has done over the past however many weeks. But I went in saying that this was a game they were going to lose. You had them winning this game and losing next week's game. I have them going 8-1 with this being the loss. So if I hold true to what I'm thinking, I think the 49ers are running the table the rest of the season, right? But yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's just this game, Jesse, but I think this game definitely makes it easier to be like, yeah, this team is legit. And I think this team is legit because they have all-time defense that's doing ridiculous things and weapons on offense that can make plays. You just need to give them the ball in space. And whether it's CMC, whether it's Debo, whether it's Ayuk, Kittle, Jennings, like there's just so many people on this team that you give them the ball in space and they're going to go get you a chunk of yards. So I don't think any team is looking at the 49ers as an easy victory. I think that, you can tell by the national media, the same national media that was trashing the 49ers all offseason. They didn't even make the top 10 ESPN power rankings, right?
My God, you're right.
You know what I'm saying?
Where are those guys at?
Yeah, where are they? Now all of a sudden the 49ers with the third string quarterback is still like top 5 as far as power rankings and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, I mean, I think that they're a legitimate legitimate team because they have a legitimate roster and a legitimate coaching staff that knows what to do with this team.
Yeah, definitely. For me, it 100% legitimized the 49ers. And I think we knew they were legit going into it, but there was a lot of questions. If this Dolphins offense went and put a lot of points on them, there would have been a lot of questions as to how good this defense is, because now that they face another top tier offense, they can't get it done and yada yada. All those questions rather have been answered. They answered with a resounding yes. We are here to stay. Our defense is the best defense in the league, especially now that Eric Armstead is back. They got legitimized. And the Dolphins were the team that got low-key exposed. Now, what I said about the 49ers as a possibility going into this game, if they didn't win it, is now happening to the Dolphins, because they were on a 5-game winning streak going into this game. They were undefeated when Tua started and finished games. Now all the questions are about the Dolphins. Are they legit? They finally faced a top-tier defense, and they could only put up 17 points. And really, the majority of that came on 2 plays. So those questions that would have been asked about the 49ers are now being asked about the Dolphins. And so if in a loss, the questions of legitimacy would be there, then in a win, the answers also have to be there. The 49ers are legitimate. Their defense is top-notch. As you said, they have weapons all over the field, and they are a legit threat. They are a legit threat, no doubt about it, especially in the NFC, where teams are probably not quite as good overall, at least top to bottom throughout the playoffs as they may be in the AFC. So, yeah, they prove that what their record is now is exactly who they are. And what their defense has done is exactly who they have been. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. 49ers throwback says, I would give up on Trey. We already talked about that one. Varuna coming in. What's up, Varuna? It's been a while. Seems like Trey does not even get the same chance as Purdy. The players backstabbed Trey on the eve that he got injured. The Mike Silver article makes me sick. I'd rather see Trey goes to a team that wants him. I don't know how true that Mike Silver article is. I'm not going to say it isn't true or it's not legitimate. I've seen how this team is rallying behind Brock Purdy and how they did behind Jimmy. I got to believe that they felt the same way about Trey. And you saw Trey post-injury hanging out with some of these guys. So I don't know. Well, I don't know how true it is. I'm sure there's some guys in the locker room that felt that, whatever. But the fan base definitely probably doesn't deserve to see what Trey Lance can be. I would say that. I mean, I think we got a lot of people that are extremely impatient and quite frankly don't know what the hell they're talking about. That's just me personally. But that's not necessarily the way the team feels. And I'm pretty confident that Kyle Shanahan is still all in on Trey Lance, and we'll see that going forward. Tinker says, well, I'm Purdy. I don't know what that says. Sure. It's still Niners and Buffalo Super Bowl and called it. It's called faith, bub. I appreciate it, Tinker. I would love nothing more. Here's a fairy tale ending to the 49ers season, all right? Regardless of the quarterback and what's going on. They get a home field game against Dallas in the NFC Championship. We get to relive that 90s rivalry. I know we got it a little bit last year, but putting it in the NFC Championship would be so much better, so much sweeter. So they play Dallas. By the way, Ayuk has already put out the bulletin board material for Dallas. Essentially called them soft in an interview just yesterday, which I absolutely love. So you get that game, you get that rematch. Then you get the Berman Bowl, which is Buffalo versus San Francisco. And anybody who grew up watching Berman and him talking about games after the fact and going through highlights with all of his funny noises, you know what I'm talking about. The Berman Bowl, nobody circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills. That would be the ideal scenario. And then, of course, the 49ers win, and oh, poor Buffalo fans, 0-5 in the Super Bowls. That would be brutal for them. But for us, story, book, ending for sure. Suneil, it looks like you're actually at home. Do you have anything coming up this week that we should talk about?
Not anything specifically planned, but stay tuned. Maybe I'll jump on a stream and whatnot. I don't even know what it feels like to be home lately. So we'll see. We'll see what's going on.
Absolutely, brother. Well, for me, there is going to be no Behind Enemy Lines this week because The Tampa Bay guy I had was unable to make it. I reached out to 3 or 4 more, weren't able to make times line up, but that's okay. I'm going to bring back the call-in show tomorrow. So instead of doing Behind Enemy Lines, we're going to do a call-in show. And I think things happen for a reason. I think with all the things that have happened this last week, with the big win against the Dolphins, Jimmy Garoppolo being done for the season and now not being done for the season, Shanahan, the way that he talked about Trey, and now it seems like the door might be open, according to Tim Kawakami. There's so much to talk about, and I think it's great. We'll allow you guys to sound off tomorrow. So tomorrow is going to be the call-in show, the same time that we would normally do Behind Enemy Lines, right after my show, 49ers After Dark with Grant Cohn. So make sure you tune in. And for all of you in the chat that don't like what I had to say about Trey Lance and you think I'm a clown and full of shit and all this, tomorrow is your time to call in. Call in and let's talk about it. Let's, debate it. I'll be respectful. You be respectful. And let's talk through it. I'd love to hear your opinions on it. So tomorrow, 10:20 Eastern, let's have that conversation. And until then, Lumberjack boys.